Hello and welcome back to Beamng.Drive. It's been quite some time and there have been a lot of updates. For this game. And I wanted to have a go with it, see how it would be. And we are doing some speed runs. Now, in order to do speed runs, you need to have a road. And the road that I chose is a pretty interesting one. It's at the Utah map. It's not perfectly straight. It has a cliff on the end of it. It has obstacles. It's got bends. And at the end of it, if you don't stop, there is a cliff wall to run into. Yeah, it's pretty nasty. It's It's 2 lanes, so you don't have that much room to wiggle around. But you should be able to more or less max your top speed here. It's going to be pretty close to your top speed anyway. And yeah, we're starting off with a Covet, but this is the street-tuned Covet. I'm using factory, BeamNG only, no tuning, no changing parts around, just what the configuration has from the standard. And the Comet here, well, this one has an advantage in the fact it has nitrous from its configuration, which means we can get up to some pretty good speeds. 125 we get up to. And then we had to get on the brakes, and that doesn't work. Wheel over the edge gets us into an almighty flip. Many rolls. You would not want to be in that vehicle. You would be very sick and probably very dead from G-forces. It was not a happy car. It didn't work. It spit a lot of fire, but it didn't work. So, I restarted and tried again. I was going to allow myself, I wanted to get a clean run for each vehicle. One clean run. And, yeah, the Covet, this has a 4-cylinder engine. It's not the most powerful, but the nitrous does certainly help. And it was nice and controllable. It was nice and controllable. It's all a matter of, though, how late do you brake? And I braked a little too late. Yeah. And then it hit in a bush. I was scared and embarrassed. Also, I like to point out, the wheel became inverted. I didn't even hit that side of the car with the wall. I didn't hit that side of the car with the wall and it inverted the wheel. That's not how a wheel is supposed to be. But there you go. And eventually, after a few other braking incidents, I did finally get a clean run with the car. Yeah, it's not the fastest, but for a little hatchback, 4 cylinders, it's certainly not terrible. And again, that extra shot of NOS does give it that extra edge that it otherwise might not get to. But it was all about the braking points, getting the braking points right. And once you get those right, you're pretty much set. Up next was the Pizima, the modern version, if you will, like the early 2000s. And in previous iterations of BeamNG, this had always been the bit of a slacker. It wasn't very fast, it wasn't very good. However, in these recent updates they've made, they have added a higher performance version, which means it's actually quite quick. I was not expecting this, because I remember the Pizima being slow, pathetic, and not even having a street-tuned version of it. And yet, the sporty version that we have from the factory here, we're already up to 140 miles an hour in the Pizima. It was terrifyingly fast, and as such, I got on the brakes and, killed the driver. Quite significantly killed the driver. Not ideal. I think the highest point on the car was the steering wheel that was jutting out through the windshield. And then the wheel came back and then the wheel went away. Yeah, it was not ideal. It very much surprised me, the Pizima, because I hadn't really been playing the game for quite some time, and then all of a sudden this Pizima is just flying at crazy high speeds, especially for what it is. And it really surprised me, hence the slight lockup of the brakes and the accident. So I tried again, and now I realized there was actually a fair bit of speed. I was a bit more prepared for the speed at which you would have to get stopped at. Because again, the whole point of this is to go as fast as possible and come to a controlled stop without crashing. And again, we get to over 140 miles an hour when I get on the brakes. Now, the brakes did actually start to fade, which is not ideal. But we did get it to a controlled stop. Admittedly, too much of a controlled stop. And I decided to add a rule for this. If I brake too early, I am allowed a redo, just because you're not actually extracting all of the performance you can if you brake early like an idiot, like I did there. So I went a little bit later, and yeah, I spin out and somehow recover it. I don't know how I did that, but very smooth recovery. I meant to do that. It was on purpose, okay? Sure, on purpose. So yeah, brake fade not ideal, but the speed genuinely surprised me. Now leave it to the old guard to show up the new guard, because this is the old Pizima. However, as you can see, it's not standard at all. Massive wing, massive front splitter, stripped out roll cage, massively turbocharged engine. This is the hill climb version, which means it's very fast and very, very good at this. We all knew that this would be a pretty quick car, and yes, the aerodynamics do add a fair bit of drag to it, hence why it's only slightly faster than the new Pizima, but it was crazy, and I might have killed it significantly. Locking brakes up in Beamng is very, very easy. I did try to see if the car would still drive. It didn't. No, not at all. So, I will say brakes are very easy to lock up in Beam. They're not, especially with the controller that I have, which is a good controller, but it does sometimes, it's kind of like it's either all on or all off with the brakes. It's a very difficult balancing act to get the trigger right. So you will see a lot of brake locking up. I know that sounds like a racing driver excuse, but I promise it isn't. And yes, we know the drag is significant on this vehicle, but that's part of the challenge. You gotta have a crazy fast car like this that has a lot of drag, but a lot of power, and then no brakes because you're an idiot, and then you do a very impressive barrel roll. Or you would have a very powerful car with no aerodynamics, but much difficult to drive. You might not get up to your top speed that you could have if you had that control. So it was a balancing act with this. And it was tough, so I opted to go with the hill climb version for that controllability. And as long as I get the brakes right, it's actually a very easy car to drive on this road. You see, even at 145 miles an hour, we're pretty controlled. And even with a wheel on the dirt, I still crashed because, yeah. But eventually, I did finally get a clean run with the Pizima. It took a moderately long amount of time, but it wasn't the worst vehicle, certainly. That would come much later. But drag did not help with the straight line speed, but it did help with the controllability, and as such, finally I was able to just pull it up in time to get a clean run out of the car. Yeah, that was scary, the understeer there from the four-wheel drive. That was quite scary, but provided you can get it under control, it is a very fast car as you do some celebratory donuts. Now, remember when I said you want to have as much controllability as possible? This is the other end of the spectrum. This is the 200BX Demon variant, and as you can see, all it has for aero is a wing. It also has about 700 horsepower, and is all going to the rear wheels, unlike the Pizima, which is four-wheel drive. This is rear-wheel drive. Yeah, it's terrifying. And this by far took the longest amount of time, I think, to get a good run out of it, because it's just so terrifying. You get a wheel on the dirt, you can just about get away with it, but you can see how much it upsets the car. And we get to some crazy high speeds, and we get on the brakes, and it just doesn't really stop. It doesn't turn. it is a terrifying car. Now, amusingly, it did still drive after that crash when I lost a wheel. So I wonder how fast it could go with 3 wheels. It's not very controllable. However, I could get it up to road speeds, about 40, 50 miles an hour, almost 60 miles an hour. So, yeah, that's interesting. But this car by far took the longest amount of time to get a clean run because there were a lot of accidents. A lot. And it was all down to that controllability aspect I was mentioning earlier. This vehicle is terrifying. I also had one of the earliest accidents. Yeah, it was not very quick. It was very quick, it was not very quick to learn how to drive it. Let's rephrase it that way. And this probably took 7 minutes or something like that, 7 or 8 minutes to get it right, compared to the others, which I got in 2 or 3 minutes. But it just had so much wheel spin. So much wheel spin. And eventually I did get a clean run, and once you get a clean run, it is so fast. It is so absurdly fast, but if you don't get that clean run, it will kill you. This was another vehicle that took quite some time, although not quite as much as the 200BX. This is the Beamng.Drive dragster, so it's a bit more justifiable for why it would take such a long time. I mean, look at how skinny the front tires are. They're not really tires, they're more bicycles, maybe. I think he stole some tires off a bicycle. Point is, 1,500 horsepower in this vehicle, massive rear tires for good traction, and it was all about trying to tame that crazy acceleration. Look how fast we're going, 130 on this section. We're not very controlled, 160, 170 when we get on the brakes, and that's not stopping. And we actually took the entire frame off the car. I didn't know that was possible. I know there were a few cars that the subframe could fall off, the front subframe, but I've never seen a car lose its entire frame in one fell swoop. Yeah. I think the car was quite broken after that, but yeah. This one was gonna take a while. And it was all about controlling that fury, and with the drag car, that is no easy feat. It wasn't an issue with the brakes weren't ideal, first off. The brakes did get quite hot. But it was also just a sheer lack of suspension, really, for turning. And every once in a while, being on the dirt was a dangerous thing to be on. It very much flattened the burn side. So there were a few things you couldn't do. Now this is kind of general. Running on the dirt, bad. That was a very bad thing to do. Turning with too much vigor, that would be bad. And braking too much would also be very bad. So you can see that's a very challenging combination to drive. Especially with the brutal acceleration that we have. But eventually, after another 6 or 7 minutes, I did actually get a clean run out of the vehicle, but it was tough. You had to be so precise. If you braked a millisecond too late, you were going off. You were crashing, no matter what. So it was very tricky to get the braking point right. But if you did, it was a quick car. It was seriously quick. You just had to get that controllability right. The next vehicle was the polar opposite of the Beamng side. The Fiat 600 thingy, the Piccolina. The Autobella Piccolina, I don't know how to pronounce it. Point is, it's a little Fiat. Now this is the racing version, has an air-cooled engine, and it's actually pretty quick for such a small car. It was never going to challenge the top dogs, but I was curious to see how much speed could be gotten out of such a little baby car. And, you know, it's just over 100 miles an hour we're getting up to, so the Beamng style is doing, what, 150 down here? This is doing 110, maybe, yeah. And it wasn't ideal, the first run. That was very painful. Very, very painful. But it did still drive, because it was rear-engined. Couldn't steer, kind of screwed itself by being on the side of a mountain, but it did still technically drive. Yeah, this one didn't take too long, it wasn't too bad, certainly not as bad as the Burnside of the 200BX. Probably because they're not going as fast, and partially because it is a race car, so it has racing suspension, racing tires, roll cage, and let's be honest, you were never expecting to challenge the top dogs on this, but it was still pretty solid. As you can see, we did get a clean run. Not bad. Not bad from the Piccolina. Piccolina? I don't know. Whatever. I was very proud of her being such a small car. Up next was the Miramar. This is the street-tuned version. I opted not to go for the racing version in respect to the street-tuned because typically the race versions have shorter gears and not quite as much power as the street versions, just because the street versions are kind of like tuner cars, if you will, and the racing cars are, well, racing cars. So, usually the street tunes get more power, and the Miramar here, well, it was never the fastest car. It's along the same lines as the Piccolina. It's not the fastest, but I'm interested to see how the old car fares, and the brakes weren't the greatest, I'll be honest. They weren't bad, but they weren't the greatest, and interestingly about this crash, nothing was damaged on it except for the windshield, and the fact that the entire left side of the car had complete suspension failure. So now it just looks like a lowrider doing one of its tilts. Yeah, we do eventually get a clean run as seen here. It's a shame, because I like the Miramar. The Miramar? Myanmar? I don't know. Myanmar is a country. Miramar, that's how you pronounce it. Miramar, I should say Myanmar. It's a good car. It's very tough, it's very reliable. It's actually not bad handling for how old it is, but the straight line speed, it is a bit lacking. It is a bit lacking, but we do get a clean run, and we do some celebratory burnouts with the old dog. Yeah, not the fastest, but not a bad showing still. Now, another crazy-ish modified sedan, the Legrand. This is a custom version. It kind of reminds me of the Buick Regal, the Grand National, the GNX, basically, because it is very powerful V6, turbocharged. It is front-wheel drive, though, which isn't ideal. However, it's not the fastest, okay? It's late 80s for this vehicle, so again with the Buick vibes. And it's not the fastest in a straight line. Yeah, and it is better than the Myanmar, and it's better than the Piccolina, but not by much. Not by much. And I mean, admittedly we do get it on the first try, so that's something. On the subject of massively turbocharged, all-wheel drive, mid-80s four-door sedans, the ETKI series. It's based on the AMG Hammer, the Mercedes thing, and this was actually the toughest vehicle to get right. Because it is, well, a Hammer. It's got many powers, many speeds, and, well, as you can see, very little in the way of aerodynamic aid, or stopping aid, or handling aid. It's pretty much a bucket of power in a regular four-door sedan. So it's very fast, and then you die. A very painful death. Just many, many painful deaths were had. Amazingly, the vehicle still kind of worked. I don't understand that. It did explode itself in terms of the temperature, but it did actually move. It was actually picking up speed from the engine. It was only 6 miles an hour, but it was actually moving after that, which is surprising considering it's missing a wheel, and 2 other wheels are shredded, so that's something. It's tough, it's a tough thing. It's still terrifying to drive, but it is tough. Yeah, again, as I said, this by far and away took the longest. This took them over 10 minutes to get right. And many, many painful accidents were had with this car to get a clean run because it doesn't have the handling. There's like a little ratio. I like to consider handling and power a ratio. You have lots of power, you need lots of handling. If you have little power, you need not as much handling. This has a very disproportionate ratio of power to handling, okay? Very disproportionate, and it was terrifying. Especially when you lock the brakes up and it flings into a wall. Just bad things can happen with this car. And again, after about 10 minutes or so, I finally got a clean run with it. But it took a long time. It was very fast once you got it right. It's very similar to the 200BX in the fact that once you got it right, it took off like a rocket ship. But until then, if you breathed on it wrong, it would kill you. So you need to be careful with that. But again, a very, very fast car once you got it right. Continuing on with the ETK theme here, we have their estates, the 800 series. Now this was the most powerful car in their ETK 800 series lineup. And this had a lot of things going for it. It was all-wheel drive, it was pretty modern, had modern suspension, so it should handle pretty well, and of course lots of power from a turbocharged engine. Unfortunately, it wasn't as quick as I was hoping. It's not bad, it's better than a few of the cars we've seen previous, but for what it is, I was expecting a fair bit more, I will be honest. And the ABS decided to play funny buggers, but it did at least complete the course on its first try. And then it proceeded to get angry at me and start flashing around. There are a lot of police cars in BeamNG, and I had to run at least one, and this was probably going to be the best bet for going fast, the ETK K-Series Police Edition. With the flashing lights, no less, we had to have the flashing lights. This vehicle was, I think it has the same engine, as the 800 series, but it is a full-blown sports car, so it should be a bit faster, and it was a bit faster, but not as fast as you would hope. The dirt claimed another victim, trying to cut the corner a little too much, ended up wrapping it around a tree. That was, surprising, shall we say. I did not expect that. And then we had a bigger problem. The electronic limitations of ETK. It's kind of like Mercedes, these vehicles. And Mercedes is well known for having their electronics not allowed to be turned off. So you get the electronic stability control off, but I couldn't get the ABS off, I couldn't get the gearbox too much out of manual mode, and it wasn't ideal, really. The wheels were very weak. In fact, that one little bump on the rock killed the entire steering setup. But eventually, the ETK here did get a clean run. It didn't take too long, about 3 minutes for this one, but I was expecting a little more. The ETKs were disappointing me, I will be honest, because they're Mercedes. They're supposed to have like 700 horsepower and be crazy and fast and uncontrollable. And they were right about the uncontrollable part, but they just aren't as fast as I was hoping for. That's all. We have another American muscle car here, this being the Night Snake. And yes, it did roll away a little bit earlier, but this is it's not quite the drag version. I didn't want to run another drag version quite yet. And I figured this would be a pretty good shout for being fast without being a drag version. This is the kind of like road legal version of the drag spec. It's as fast as you can get while still being considered a road version in the game. And it's a bit scary. I will be honest, it's a bit scary because many powers through the rear wheels. You have a very old chassis, and yeah, might have tore the car in half. Remember how I was saying the subframe can fall off a few times? Yeah, this is the vehicle with the subframe that can fall off. Now, what's interesting is, despite the subframe being off, the wheels are still somewhat attached to the steering. Steering doesn't work, but it moves. There you go. This vehicle, it took not too bad. It wasn't too bad in the old department for that. It just wasn't as quick as you would hope. You can see just the oversteer. Another one of the very quick accidents. Actually, not too bad in terms of the damage front from that. That was a pretty tame accident for the speed and the rollover, only damaging the radiator and the roof, but it didn't take too long to get a clean run for this vehicle. It was all about keeping control of the wheel spin and then getting the brakes ready once you need to, because it's pretty quick, about as fast as ETKs, and it's not as sophisticated as the ETKs. So it was a bit challenging on that front, but as you can see, we did get a clean run, and it was a relatively nice and controlled stop. This is another proper dragster. It's called the Moonhawk. It's one of the original muscle cars from Beam's early days, and, well, it has another 1,500 horsepower drag engine, and piddly front tires, which means it's all the power and none of the controls. None at all. So it was going to be a massive handful, as you can see as I wrap it on a tree on the first run, not even making it to the main straightaway. That's very painful. I think I elongated the chassis and then wrapped it around the tree. Yeah, that's a bad one. That's a very bad one. But, that would set the precedent for what was to come over the next 15 or so minutes for me, because this took a long time. There were many accidents, because there was crash, after crash, after crash, all of them very serious, mind you, after crash, and they were all very, very serious incidents, and it took quite a long time, but eventually, we did finally start to get the hang of it. We still had crashes, don't worry, there still have crashes, but we did actually get a clean run on the vehicle, and once you got a clean run, oh, it was freaking fast. It was lighter than the previous drag car that we had, the Beamng.Drive, which means it has a better power-to-weight ratio, which means it's faster. The Beamng.Drive was quick. This is alarmingly quick. And once you get it under control and get it around your brakes, it is so fast. It just took several fatalities to get there.